Before the 1950s, cinema was still finding its voice. Yet some filmmakers dared to speak louder, bolder, and braver than the world was ready for. These weren't just films. They were acts of defiance, artistic experiments, and provocations that pushed the limits of technology, storytelling, and society itself. Let's journey back to 15 of the most daring movies ever made before 1950. 1. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1920. When The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari first flickered onto screens in 1920, audiences had never seen anything like it. The story follows a sinister hypnotist, Dr. Caligari, who uses a sleepwalker to commit murders in a small German town. But it wasn't just the plot that unsettled people. It was the world it created. Every set was a distorted nightmare, crooked windows, impossible angles, spiraling staircases painted onto walls. Director Robert Wiene embraced German expressionism to visually represent psychological madness, essentially creating cinema's first dream world. At its core, the film was a response to the chaos of post-World War I Germany, a reflection of political manipulation and the fragility of human will. The twist ending, revealing the narrator's unreliable mind, was decades ahead of its time, influencing everything from Psycho to Shutter Island. The sheer audacity of making a movie that looked like a fever dream during an era when realism dominated was revolutionary. The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari didn't just tell a story, it bent reality, demanding that audiences step into a fractured psyche. Even today, more than a century later, it remains unsettling, proof that cinematic bravery is timeless. 2. The Birth of a Nation, 1915. Few films in history are as both groundbreaking and controversial as D.W. Griffith's The Birth of a Nation. On a technical level, it was a giant leap forward for cinema. Massive battle scenes, sweeping camera movements, and cross-cut editing that built nail-biting suspense. Audiences in 1915 were stunned. This was no stage play on film. It was a fully realized epic. But its narrative was another matter entirely. The film's deeply offensive racial portrayals and historical distortions sparked national outrage, leading to protests and even citywide bans. Yet its technical achievements became the blueprint for modern filmmaking, influencing generations of directors. Griffith's boldness lay in treating film as an art form on par with literature and theater, telling an expansive, emotionally charged story on a scale no one thought possible. While its content is rightfully condemned today, its impact on the language of cinema cannot be erased. It stands as both a milestone and a cautionary tale. Proof that bold filmmaking can change the medium forever, for better or worse. 3. Intolerance, 1916. Stung by the backlash to The Birth of a Nation, D.W. Griffith set out to create his most ambitious project yet. Intolerance. Released. Just a year later, it was unlike anything audiences had seen. 4 separate stories, each set in a different era. Ancient Babylon, the time of Christ, 16th century France, and early 20th century America, all intercut to show humanity's endless capacity for cruelty. The sets were monumental. The Babylonian sequence alone featured walls towering 300 feet high, massive elephant statues, and thousands of extras. Griffith pioneered cross-cutting on an unprecedented scale, weaving the narratives together with the image of a woman rocking a cradle, symbolizing the passage of time. While the film initially confused viewers and failed commercially, its ambition was staggering. It tackled universal themes, love, oppression, injustice, on a scale that would inspire filmmakers for decades. Intolerance wasn't just bold, it was cinematic poetry written across centuries, a defiant artistic statement from a director determined to prove that film could explore the deepest truths of the human condition. 4. Napoleon, 1927. Abel Gance didn't just want to tell the story of Napoleon Bonaparte. He wanted audiences to feel the storm of his rise. In Napoleon, Gance unleashed a tidal wave of cinematic innovation, handheld cameras decades before Hollywood embraced them, split screens, rapid-fire editing, and the groundbreaking polyvision process, a triple-screen projection that surrounded viewers in the film's climactic moments. For 1927 audiences used to static cameras and staged scenes, it was overwhelming. The film sweeps across Napoleon's youth, military victories, and political genius, but it's not just a history lesson. It's an emotional odyssey. Gance's camera dives into the chaos of battle, with soldiers charging directly toward the lens, smoke and flags whipping through the frame. In one sequence, he straps the camera to a galloping horse, making the audience part of the charge. His editing style was equally radical, montages that exploded with rhythm, quick cuts that anticipated the energy of modern action films. When it premiered, Napoleon stunned critics and filmmakers alike, but it was also a logistical nightmare to project in theaters. The triple-screen finale could only be shown in specially equipped venues, limiting its reach. Over the decades, the film was chopped into smaller versions, its full vision lost, until painstaking restorations revived it for modern audiences. Gance's audacity wasn't just in the subject matter, it was in daring to believe cinema could break its own rules. Napoleon remains a testament to pure creative ambition, the kind of project that pushes the medium forward by refusing to play safe. Fifth Metropolis, 1927. Fritz Lang's Metropolis wasn't merely a science fiction film, it was a cinematic prophecy. Set in a sprawling futuristic city where the wealthy live in sky-high towers and the workers toil deep underground, it tackled themes of class, struggle, industrialization, and the dehumanizing effects of unchecked technology. But what truly made it bold was its scope and style. Nothing in 1927 looked like this. Lang's vision was enormous, massive sets of gleaming skyscrapers, sweeping highways, and endless machine halls, all created through intricate miniatures, matte paintings, and pioneering special effects. The film's robot, the Maschinenmensch, became an icon of sci-fi design, influencing everything from Star Wars droids to modern AI imagery. The crowd scenes are staggering, with hundreds of extras moving in synchronized rhythms like human machinery. But Metropolis is also deeply human, centered on the love story between Freder, the son of the city's ruler, and Maria, a compassionate workers' advocate. The narrative bridges fantasy and social commentary, ending with the call for unity between the head and the hands through the heart. At its premiere, Metropolis was both praised and criticized. Some called it a masterpiece. Others found it too strange, too long, too political. Censors in multiple countries cut the film down, and for decades, large portions were lost. Still, its imagery, the cityscapes, the robot's transformation, the workers' revolt, never faded from cinema history. Restorations have brought it closer to Lang's original vision, and today, it stands as one of the boldest blends of spectacle and social vision the screen has ever seen. 6. The Maltese Falcon, 1931. Most people think of the 1941 Humphrey Bogart version when they hear The Maltese Falcon, but the 1931 original was a different beast entirely, and far bolder. Released in the pre-code era before Hollywood censorship fully took hold, it adapted Dashiell Hammett's hard-boiled novel with a level of grit and moral ambiguity that startled audiences. The film follows private detective Sam Spade as he's drawn into a web of greed, betrayal, and murder, all revolving around a priceless jewel-encrusted statuette. What made it daring wasn't just the plot, but its frank, unpolished realism. Characters behaved with a selfishness and ruthlessness rarely seen in films of the time. Conversations hinted at impropriety. Relationships carried a weight of moral compromise, and justice wasn't neatly served by the final reel. Director Roy Del Ruth stripped away the romantic gloss that many studios preferred, creating a world of smoke-filled rooms, tense standoffs, and sharp-tongued exchanges. The cinematography leaned into shadows and close-ups that made audiences feel like they were eavesdropping on dangerous deals. The ending, morally ambiguous and unsentimental, left viewers unsettled. When the strict Hays Code was enforced a few years later, films like this could no longer exist in their raw form. In fact, The Maltese Falcon was considered so bold that Warner Brothers locked it away for years, fearing it couldn't be reissued under new rules. Its unapologetic approach to character flaws, corruption, and gray morality makes it a fascinating artifact of a short-lived but fearless era of American filmmaking. 7 Babyface, 1933. In 1933, just months before the Hollywood Production Code began to clamp down on storytelling, Warner Brothers released Babyface, a film so provocative in theme and so unapologetic in its depiction of ambition that it became one of the most heavily censored movies of the pre-code era. Barbara Stanwyck stars as Lily Powers, a young woman from a grim Pennsylvania steel town who's been working in her father's dingy speakeasy since childhood. Tired of exploitation and poverty, she heads to New York City with one singular goal: to use her intelligence, charm, and cunning to escape the bottom rung of society. What followed was unlike anything audiences had seen. Lily works her way up through a major bank, floor by floor, department by department, leaving a trail of scandal and career upheavals behind her. The most daring element wasn't just her calculated rise, it was how the film made no apologies for her drive. While later edits softened her character's choices, the original cut made her a portrait of female agency and unapologetic determination in a male-dominated world. The dialogue was sharp, the pacing brisk, and Stanwyck's performance electric. She didn't just play Lily, she embodied her hunger for control over her destiny. Censors were outraged. The original ending, in which Lily retains her wealth and position, was altered so she would be punished and redeemed, in line with the morality rules that would soon govern Hollywood. But the pre-code version, rediscovered decades later, reveals Babyface as a razor-sharp commentary on power, opportunity, and survival. It remains a time capsule of an era when Hollywood briefly dared to let ambition be complicated, human, and unvarnished. 8. Frankenstein, 1931. When James Whale's Frankenstein debuted in 1931, audiences weren't prepared for the horror or the humanity it brought to the screen. Adapted loosely from Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, the film tells the story of Dr. Henry Frankenstein, a scientist who defies nature by assembling a man from corpses and bringing him to life. But instead of pure terror, the film layered tragedy into its creature, played by Boris Karloff with heartbreaking subtlety. What made it bold was its unflinching engagement with themes that, for the time, were almost unthinkable: the boundaries of science, the morality of creation, and the fear of the unknown. Early scenes of grave robbing, laboratory experiments, and the now iconic "It's Alive" moment tested the limits of what 1930s audiences could handle. But it was one particular sequence, where the monster, in childlike innocence, befriends a young girl by a pond, that became notorious. When he accidentally drowns her, the shock was so great that some theaters cut the scene entirely. Karloff's makeup, designed by Jack Pierce, was itself a bold leap in visual storytelling. The sunken eyes, flat head, and neck bolts became an instant cultural symbol. Whale's Gothic sets and chiaroscuro lighting gave the film a surreal, almost nightmarish beauty, elevating it beyond simple horror. Despite censorship cuts, Frankenstein was a sensation, cementing Universal's reputation for monster films and proving that horror could be both artistically ambitious and commercially successful. It was daring not just in what it showed, but in its insistence that audiences confront their own fears about creation, responsibility, and what truly makes someone a monster. 9. Freaks, 1932. In the early 1930s, MGM was the most glamorous studio in Hollywood, which made its release of Freaks all the more shocking. Directed by Todd Browning, the film cast real sideshow performers, people with physical differences rarely seen in cinema except as curiosities, and placed them at the center of the story. This was no exploitative spectacle, it was a drama about love, loyalty, and betrayal within a traveling circus community. The plot follows a beautiful trapeze artist who marries a kind-hearted circus dwarf for his inheritance, only to plot his murder. When his fellow performers discover her scheme, they exact a chilling revenge in a rain-soaked sequence that remains one of horror's most haunting finales. But the film's true boldness lies in how it subverts expectations. The so-called freaks are portrayed as compassionate, honorable, and fiercely protective, while the normal outsiders are deceitful and cruel. Browning, who had once worked in carnivals, shot the film with empathy and intimacy, giving audiences a rare look into the daily lives of performers with dwarfism, conjoined twins, and other conditions. However, 1932 audiences were unprepared for such raw authenticity. The film was met with outrage, banned in multiple countries, and pulled from theaters within weeks. MGM even disowned it, burying it for decades. Today, Freaks is celebrated as a cult classic, recognized for its bravery in challenging ideas of beauty, normalcy, and humanity. Its most famous scene, the chant of one of us," has echoed through pop culture for nearly a century, a defiant anthem from a film that refused to look away from the truth of the marginalized. 10. Duck Soup, 1933. By 1933, the Marx Brothers had already cemented their place as Hollywood's masters of chaos. But Duck Soup wasn't just another comedy. It was a full-on assault on political hypocrisy, authoritarian leaders, and the absurdity of war. In a time when studios often avoided biting political satire, Paramount Pictures gave Groucho, Chico, Harpo, and Zeppo the freedom to go for the jugular. The plot is deceptively simple. Fredonia, a bankrupt fictional nation, appoints Rufus T. Firefly as its leader. Within minutes, Firefly is insulting dignitaries, firing cabinet members, and stumbling the country into a nonsensical war with neighboring Sylvania. But beneath the jokes lies a daring truth. This was a comedy that exposed how easily vanity, incompetence, and greed could plunge nations into chaos. The humor was razor-sharp, with Groucho's rapid-fire insults and Harpo's silent, surreal antics blending perfectly. Classic sequences, like the mirror gag and the absurd musical number, "We're Going to War," are still studied for their comedic timing and subversive undertones. Director Leo McCarey kept the pacing relentless, ensuring that even as the gags piled up, the satirical edge never dulled. When Duck Soup premiered, it wasn't a box office hit. In fact, it puzzled some audiences who expected more straightforward slapstick. But over time, its boldness became clear. This wasn't escapist comedy. It was truth, wrapped in absurdity. It dared to laugh at the very structures that most films of the era treated with reverence. Today, it stands as one of the bravest comedies ever made, proving that sometimes the most dangerous weapon against power is laughter itself. 11. The Rules of the Game, 1939. Jean Renoir's The Rules of the Game is a masterpiece that was almost destroyed by its own honesty. Released just months before World War II erupted in Europe, the film is set in a lavish French country estate where aristocrats and servants mingle over a weekend of hunting, flirting, and scheming. Beneath the elegance, Renoir exposes a society blinded by privilege, incapable of seeing, or caring about, the storm approaching. The film's boldness lay in its refusal to present its characters as pure heroes or villains. Everyone is flawed, selfish, and tragically human. The hunting scene, in particular, is a cinematic gut punch. Renoir intercuts the jovial chatter of the hunt with stark, unflinching shots of animals being killed, a brutal metaphor for the coming human slaughter. Visually, The Rules of the Game was groundbreaking. Renoir used deep focus and intricate blocking to allow multiple layers of action to unfold within a single frame, letting viewers choose where to look. The result is a sense of constant chaotic life, as if the camera were capturing reality itself. When it premiered, audiences were furious. Some booed and jeered, others called it unpatriotic. The government even banned it for its demoralizing portrayal of the French upper class. Renoir cut the film down in an attempt to appease critics, but the damage was done. It wasn't until decades later, when a restored version premiered, that the world recognized it as one of cinema's great achievements. The rules of the game remains bold, not just for what it showed, but for its fearless understanding that the greatest tragedies are often born from the smallest hypocrisies. 12. Children of Paradise, 1945. Filmed during the Nazi occupation of France, Children of Paradise is not just bold, it's miraculous. Directed by Marcel Carné, this sweeping romantic drama unfolds in the bustling theater district of 1820s Paris, following the intertwined lives of a beautiful courtesan and the men who love her, a mime, an actor, a criminal, and an aristocrat. The production itself was an act of resistance. With France under German control, Carné and his team used the film's elaborate 19th century setting as a shield to slip in subversive themes about freedom, dignity, and the resilience of the human spirit. The crew included resistance members working in secret, and filming stretched over 2 years due to shortages, bombings, and constant political tension. The boldness of Children of Paradise is found in its sheer scope and artistry. Shot in 2 parts, totaling over 3 hours, it featured massive crowd scenes with hundreds of extras, an incredible feat given wartime restrictions. The characters are richly drawn, and the dialogue, written by poet Jacques Prévert, blends romance with biting social commentary. When it premiered in 1945, just after France's liberation, audiences saw it not only as a love story, but as a celebration of French culture's survival under oppression. Critics hailed it as the French gone with the wind, but its heart beats to a far more rebellious rhythm. Every frame radiates defiance, not just to the Nazis, but to the idea that art can be silenced. It remains one of cinema's great testaments to love, freedom, and the power of performance. 13. Nosferatu, 1922. When Nosferatu crept into theaters in 1922, it was unlike any horror film the world had seen. Directed by F.W. Murnau, this unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula was so brazen that it nearly vanished from history. Stoker's widow sued for copyright infringement, and courts ordered all copies destroyed, yet a few prints survived, allowing its legend to grow. Max Schreck's portrayal of Count Orlok remains one of the most chilling performances in cinema. Tall, gaunt, and rat-like, with clawed hands and sharp teeth, Orlok was a predator, stripped of romantic glamour. Murnau's use of shadow, the infamous shot of Orlok's silhouette climbing a staircase, embedded pure dread into audiences' minds. Shooting on location in German towns, he blended Gothic horror with eerie realism, making Orlok's curse feel as if it could spread beyond the screen. What made Nosferatu bold wasn't just its nightmarish imagery, but its defiance of artistic and legal boundaries. By altering names and details from Dracula, Murnau hoped to skirt copyright, but the essence of Stoker's tale remained. The lawsuit nearly destroyed the film, but in surviving, it became a cornerstone of cinematic horror. Its influence is immeasurable, inspiring countless vampire stories, visual homages, and even meta-films like Shadow of the Vampire. Watching Nosferatu today, its slow, deliberate pacing and surreal visuals still carry an unsettling power, proof that true horror needs no sound, no color, just the right shadow at the right moment. 14. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, 1931. In 1931, Rouben Mamoulian's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde pushed technical boundaries and moral limits, delivering one of the most daring early sound films. Adapted from Robert Louis Stevenson's novella, it tells of a kind, idealistic doctor who creates a potion to separate his good and evil sides, only to unleash the monstrous Hyde. Frederick March's performance was a tour de force, earning him an Academy Award. With Hyde, March wasn't a lumbering brute. He was primal, unpredictable, and unsettlingly human. The transformation sequences, achieved without digital trickery, were groundbreaking. Napoleon used colored filters and makeup visible only under certain lighting, then gradually altered the light mid-shot to reveal Hyde emerging before the audience's eyes. The film's boldness also came from its psychological depth. This wasn't just a horror story, it was a study of human duality, temptation, and the darkness that resides in everyone. Scenes of Hyde's cruelty, his manipulation of others, and Jekyll's growing inability to control his alter ego shocked 1931 audiences unused to such moral complexity on screen. When the production code began to be enforced in 1934, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was deemed too intense for reissue. A tamer 1941 version followed, but it couldn't match the raw power of Napoleon's vision. Even today, the 1931 original stands as a daring exploration of the human psyche, a reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones we create ourselves. 15. Dead of Night, 1945. By 1945, anthologies were common in literature, but rarely had they been attempted in film with such chilling precision as Dead of Night. This British production weaves together 5 supernatural tales framed by a country house gathering where the guests realize they've all shared the same haunting dream. Each segment explores a different flavor of horror, a ghostly premonition, a haunted mirror, a deadly children's game, a golf course packed gone wrong, and, most famously, a ventriloquist's dummy with a mind of its own. Directed by multiple filmmakers, the anthology maintains a consistent mood of creeping dread, aided by atmospheric black and white cinematography that turns everyday settings into places of unease. What made Dead of Night bold was its ending. Instead of resolving the nightmare, the film loops back to its opening, trapping the protagonist and the audience in an endless cycle. This was decades before nonlinear horror narratives became popular. In 1945, audiences expecting neat resolutions left the theater unsettled, unable to shake the feeling that they were still inside the dream. The ventriloquist sequence, in particular, became legendary, influencing later films like Magic and Child's Play. But beyond the EI scares, Dead of Night challenged the notion that horror had to explain itself. It embraced ambiguity, inviting viewers to fill in the gaps. And in doing so, it crafted one of the most quietly daring horror experiences of the 20th century. From shadowy expressionist nightmares to unflinching political satires, these 15 films didn't just entertain, they redefined what cinema could be. Their boldness still resonates, proving that courage on screen can echo across generations. Which of these daring classics will you watch first? The reel is waiting. Press play.